By their nature, video games are designed to create a sense of power and strength in the player, to create a world or a challenge or villain that we ultimately defeat, growing stronger to right a wrong or save the world. But what if, in your search for justice, a game led you astray all along? Team Ico's Shadow of the Colossus was originally released in 2005 for the PlayStation 2, then again as a remake that mostly works as a highly polished remaster in 2018 for the PlayStation 4. And in both instances, this slow, atmospheric, stripped-down game distills its experience to a series of encounters between the player and 16 mythic beasts referred to as colossi. But this is no story of setting the world right. Instead, this story of a lone warrior seeking to bring the woman he loves back to life is an exploration of a beautiful world and our place in its destruction. To me, Shadow of the Colossus illustrates the breadth of possibility of the video game medium, creating an experience that isn't cinematic, but isn't truly gamified. Instead, it's immersive in an utterly unique way that illustrates how all video games are art, and how this second game from Team Ico in particular is truly high art. Come with me on this journey into the forbidden land of Shadow of the Colossus, and its unforgettable, corrupted beauty. Led by game designer Fumito Ueda, Japanese video game studio Team Ico lasted from 1997 until 2011, and produced only 3 games. Ico in 2001 for the PlayStation 2, Shadow of the Colossus in 2005 for the PlayStation 2, and The Last Guardian in 2016 for the PlayStation 4, at which point the studio had been folded into Gen Design, also founded by Ueda, to help finish this third game after years and years of development hell. It was in this decade and a half that Team Ico became known for creating totally unique games that didn't conform to any pre-existing molds, while also struggling under the weight of Ueda's perfectionism and the difficult development of brand new ideas in gaming. Ico in particular set the mold for what was to come. It's a very bare-bones story. A boy with horns locked in a castle seeks to escape alongside a girl who was also locked away. It's essentially one giant puzzle built around the image of the boy and girl holding hands and running away together. But its sense of fantasy and a quiet, beautiful heart really inform everything, with the game focused on the experience over a complex story or lore. And this defines everything that came after. The strength of Shadow of the Colossus is its simplicity. Barely any talking, very few video gamey things to do. So much of this game is traveling across its quiet, beautiful world. And that allows you to superimpose your own feelings and interpretations on what your character is going through. The game opens with our young hero named Wander, who comes to a strange land on his horse Agro with the body of a young woman, Mono. We learn that Mono was sacrificed out of fear that she had a dark destiny, and here, within an ancient temple, Wander encounters the entity Dormin, who promises to restore Mono's life if Wander slays 16 colossi that roam this forbidden land. And with that simple setup, and really no other plot development beyond our encounters with the beasts and scenes of an approaching group of warriors, we're off on our adventure. Is this a beautiful, peaceful world of nature? Or is it haunted, silent, and a sign of something gone wrong? Is your version of Wander a reflective, thoughtful hero considering what he's going through? Or is he a man possessed, constantly in search of the next beast in his mission? That's really all up to you, and while there are only so many things you can technically do in the world of Shadow of the Colossus, feel free to pick as much fruit, eat as many lizards, and pray at as many shrines as you want to if you'd like to be an overpowered completionist. The latitude of feeling within all of that is what really makes it special. According to Ueda, I created the more open world of Shadow because Ico was an adventure game set in such a small space, and I spent 4 years in that closed space, so I wanted to go out into something more open. I've never forgotten my experience playing Shadow of the Colossus the first time, all those years ago on the PlayStation 2. It stayed with me for so long, and from both that first time experiencing its quiet and moving story, to revisiting it through the remake, I've found a deep love for this game as a one-of-a-kind adventure. I think the first time I ever heard of Shadow, it was pitched as a game that was all boss fights all the time. And wow, was I thinking something different. Like somewhere between the last level of a Doom game and the first level of a God of War game. But just non-stop explosions and violence for 8 hours. Yeah, that's pretty different than what this game actually is. Given its small focus on what can be done, Shadow's controls are pretty limited too. Run, jump, roll, climb, then call your horse and steer. Combat itself is little more than 2 options despite boss fights being the defining aspect. Stabbing or slashing with your sword, and shooting an arrow from your bow. And I think that Team Ico designed Wander to very clearly not be an action star. He's kinda clumsy, tripping, rolling, and falling all over himself while in combat. Climbing up and running across a Colossus is filled with moments of getting tossed around and hanging on for dear life, while a giant creature shakes you like it's trying to get the last drop of shampoo out of a bottle. I mean, come on, just add some water, right? Oh god, I'm poor. There's only one way to defeat a Colossus. Climb up to its glowing weak points and stab until the creature's health bar is fully depleted. I think that the inclination of developers and the desire of players, which I've seen increase over time as the capabilities of games increase, is to want to put in as many playstyle options as possible. It's great that the whole play how you want approach is possible now. And there are a lot of games that benefit from that flexibility. But I sometimes think this dilutes the strength of a game, because the breadth of approaches means that there's no singular intended game experience from the developer. If you could kill the Colossus with arrows, they're really only a means to an end here, then there would be many different approaches to these encounters instead of what Team Ico intended, which is close-up and personal encounters, where you intimately understand the workings of a Colossus, and then kill it because a voice told us to. Every Colossus has its own unique attitude, playstyle, and key to conquering, but they fall into 5 categories: bipedal walker, flyer, swimmer. The sand dune monster is basically the same, just underground and not water, small beast, and runner. To me, the walkers are the most closely associated with the image of the game and the most satisfying battles. Flyers have the most majestic moments and the most frustration. Runners are the most tragic. Swimmers are just flyers but more tedious. And the small beasts have the most intense encounters. According to producer Kenji Kaido, the team collected a lot of base materials and images, everything from the motion of cars and industrial equipment and hydraulic presses. We brought all of the material together, and we decided the player should be unsure as to whether it's living or mechanical. Every element of Shadow of the Colossus is designed to create a feeling of solitude. From its lack of enemies to its quiet soundscape to the ways in which its map is filled with wide open spaces that highlight your smallness within the vastness of nature. The only surprise encounters are when a beast finally appears, but even then, you know it's coming. Outside of these battles, you can rest easy knowing that there will be neither enemy nor friend to run into. You are truly alone, and our lead character of Wander is always silent, a stoic protagonist who has so little definition that we can overlay all our own thoughts and feelings onto him. Composer Ōtani's score really underlines the majesty and sacredness of this forbidden land. There's a little more bombast added during the Colossus fights, but even then, we're meant to be in awe, which brings our minds back to the tragic nature of killing these creatures. There's a beauty to just how long it sometimes takes to reach the next Colossus. Shadow's map is very big, but not exhaustingly enormous, meaning that a journey from the central temple to the location of a beast can take dozens of minutes or even hours if you get sidetracked. The mechanics of travel are very simple, just a couple button pushes and moving the joystick to get a running wander or galloping aggro around the obstacles in the way. But that's it, just enough to prevent us from zoning out on autopilot, but not overwhelming us with inputs. And so we're forced to sit in our own feelings, taking in this world and letting it guide our mind. Does this quiet, darkly beautiful world make you feel sad? Does it bring you peace? Do all the thoughts you've kept at bay with a barrage of apps, messages, and media overwhelm you when you can't drown them out anymore? You know, I've seen that more and more people are afraid to be alone with their own thoughts. It's part of the reason why we bombard ourselves with so much stimuli, and it's a vicious cycle as, in doing so, we need it more and more to stay focused on anything but our own internal lives. We blast our minds with videos. Oops, breaking the fourth wall here. Hey Diego, how's it going? We pour endless podcasts into our ears. We scroll through constantly refreshing social media apps, all in the hopes that we feel something, anything, that doesn't come from inside our own minds. And really, I think one of the biggest failings of modern society is that so many people never examine their own ideas and beliefs. They simply put themselves on the mindless track that their assumed worldviews have put them on. Why do you think the things you do? Who taught you to see others in the way you see them? If you actually step back from yourself for a moment and considered why you thought the way you thought, would you still think the same way on the other side? The unexamined life is not worth living. Socrates said that in 399 BC. This was already a problem 2,400 years ago, and they didn't even have smartphones back then. Well, Socrates, old buddy, I'm glad that time machine didn't bring you to 2024, because you'd have died of shame. Of course, it's ironic that my thoughts stray to these ideas because of a video game, the most highly stimulating media in the world, fully engaging a player's sight, touch, hearing, and complete focus, and pushing away everything else. And yet, Colossus brings all those senses together in its experience, only to suddenly drop away the stimulation and leave us feeling alone, almost zen-like in its solitude. Games that are able to fully grab the player's heart and mind, and then redirect it in a way we wouldn't normally expect from the medium, can be experiences that forever stand out from the field. As for Wander himself, he sets about destroying 16 creatures the world has never seen because a voice told him to, never questioning why. I think what's important to understand is that the vagaries of every Team Ico game are intentionally left mysterious. For me, it's not important to tell the details of the story, said Ueda. In Japan, there is a poet expression called a haiku, where you don't explain some things in detail and let the receivers understand or use their imagination with what is presented. That lets the receivers make their own story from their imagination, and I think this is also a good style of expression for video games, at this moment. In the future, someone may discover there's another way to do narrative and tell stories through gaming. But at this moment, I think this is a great way to tell stories. One through line that I think every player is forced to experience is the tragedy of killing each of the colossi. Their designs, which blend statuesque stone ridges for facial features and body contours, with dark, hairy bodies somewhere between fur and grass, are intimidating. They're darkly colored, imposing, and their feelings of both the natural and unnatural make them a little uncanny to our subconscious. Should these creatures exist? Late-game twists reveal that they aren't necessarily a normal part of nature, but they're also not in violation of it. With each encounter, we begin to understand them more, and see them as a seamless part of the world around them. Their designs and methods make sense within the parts of the world they live in. They don't violate their surroundings or break their habitats. And eventually, what you come to realize is that almost every Colossus exists in a natural state of peace. These aren't rampaging monsters that are destroying the world. They aren't even dangerous predators that will target someone nearby. In order to enter combat with them, Wanderer must violate their peaceful existence, and often antagonize them into attacking in order to get to their weaknesses. And that is where I think Shadow's biggest critique of mankind's relationship with nature comes into full view. What is our relationship with the world around us? Do we tame animals for companionship or a sense of mastery? What are the actual minds and emotions of the livestock we breed and slaughter for the sake of massive, indulgent meals? In so much of the world, we've moved past hunting to stay alive, and instead don't even have to think about the massive industrial farms that move in cows, pigs, chickens, and everything else we see as a meal on legs, and move out packaged, sanitized meat by the ton every day. Do we chop down forests to make a home a person needs, or to make way for another mill that makes someone else a small fortune? Why do we hold ourselves in so much higher regard than so much other life on the planet? And are we past seeing nature as something beautiful that makes us question our own place in the world, and just see it as something we can turn into a quick buck? In Shadow of the Colossus, Wander sees each beast as something else to be conquered, and a beautiful creature whose only value is to give him something he wants. And in the process, he corrupts the world around him, and in turn is corrupted himself. The experience of climbing up and conquering each Colossus reminds me of hiking up a mountain. From a distance, they seem like impenetrable, unknowable things of beauty, and exist as one whole piece. But once you're on the trail, they become complex environments with their own ecosystems, their own types of soil, animals, and plants. You aren't thinking anymore about the massive monolith that filled the sky, but instead, what's right in front of you. Shadow of the Colossus forces you to become intimately familiar with each beast as you choose to kill it. And to know an animal and slaughter it is completely different from the typical ways in which we commonly consume meat today. It's very easy to not think about the actual animal that was killed for you to consume and live when it's prepackaged in the market for you to take home. It's easy not to value and appreciate the life of an animal that dies for you. But that's a choice that has to be made. Ultimately, Shadow of the Colossus makes each death a choice for the player. Of course, to not kill a beast means the game can't move forward, and thankfully, I don't think that Team Ico's game is actually shaming you for the actions you take. Side note, I absolutely hate when games have you blast through countless enemies and then have the story shame you for killing people. How could you kill all those innocent NPCs? They had off-screen families that don't actually exist. Yes, thank you, video game. Would you next like to shame me for spending money on you? These developers know that they made the game this way and not me, right? Games are supposed to envelop you in their world and begin to eliminate the boundary between player and character until our feelings and motivations are all mixed up together. And Shadow is really great at doing that. This approach is exactly the same in both the 2005 original and the 2018 remake, which was created by Bluepoint Games for the PS4 as Team Ico was defunct by this point, and Ueda's new company, Gen Design, was, and still is, apparently working on a new game that no one knows anything about, and who knows when that will actually be finished. Classic Ueda. Really, the only thing the remake changes is the addition of 79 collectibles hidden throughout the world. It's an incentive to explore more of the detailed, complex world of Shadow that was already there, with most of the secrets and fascinating details of the world ported over from the original. But really, the point of exploring more of Shadow instead of simply traveling to the next beast is to understand more of this place, not to gain an item or feature. Another uniquely non-gamified aspect that rewards the player for not pursuing that next hit of dopamine. But no matter what, we eventually reach Shadow of the Colossus' great endgame twist. So spoilers if you somehow don't know where this all leads. In the end, what we find out, and really what the game has been hinting toward from the very beginning, is that we've been tricked. Dormin isn't a benevolent spirit, but instead is a dark god that was split into 16 pieces eons ago and locked away in each of the colossi. By killing these giants, we've allowed Dormin to slowly be released and allowed to reform. Wander has been played for a fool all this time, and once killed by the men who arrived too late to stop him, is fully possessed and transformed by Dormin, becoming a shadowy giant here to destroy everything in its way. But this shouldn't come as a surprise. Team Ico has pointed us toward Dormin's evil all along, with each death causing a dark force to fill Wander. But our hero's single-mindedness takes a toll, with aggro seeming to fall to his death on the way to the final boss. A massive, absolutely evil final challenge. So after all this time destroying the colossi, we finally get to become one. But what I find fascinating is that, even in this new form of massive power, we're really limited in what we can do. This form of Dormin limps and crawls along as we're able to smash the men here to stop us, but not truly able to be powerful like the many giants we slayed. Of course, we're not really meant to destroy everything and take over the world. Team Ico has made this into a momentary grasp at power that's meant to fail, with the men escaping and a portal being opened that, no matter how much we struggle, sucks Dormin and Wander into it, ending the evil once and for all. I find it really fascinating that Shadow has one inevitable outcome for the player, no matter what they do or how long they spend in the game. There are no alternate endings or choices to be made that can impact where it all goes. Because, no matter what, Wander has only one all-consuming goal, and everything done is in service to that. It's a story of being so obsessed with one hope, one demand, that we blind ourselves to everything around us, including everything that will need to be sacrificed to achieve what we want. But Shadow, despite its ideas of decay and destruction, ends on a hopeful, bittersweet note. Wander's quest did succeed, and Mono was resurrected, with Wander reincarnated into a baby boy with horns alongside a still-alive aggro. Together, they find a beautiful garden shrine, and we realize that there is still hope for new life in the shadow of death. Some have interpreted the ending to tie back into the developer's first game, Ico, but I think any direct one-to-one link adds a darkness to Shadow's ending that shouldn't be there. Theories that Mono becomes the evil queen in search of eternal life, intertwined with generations of descendants from Wander, are interesting and build out a larger world between these two stories. But there's a sense of peace and resolution to Shadow's end that I think is kinda spoiled by that idea. To me, the ending of Shadow of the Colossus is the full, complete resolution of a life's search for peace and solitude. There are no more dangers in this forbidden land. There are no more warriors that will disrupt its beauty. Life will go on, now between a mother and son, free from the cycle of man's corruption. And the hope that one day what we destroy can become beautiful again. Thanks for watching today's video, and Draper rolls on with a video game video. Shadow of the Colossus is yet another topic covered this month that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. So in the spirit of checking off all of these long time in the works videos, I thought it was finally time to talk about Shadow of the Colossus. As you may know if you follow the channel for a while, I make video game videos every so often, but they're definitely not a major part of the channel, although I always want to make more than I do every year. And I'm hoping that as we go into 2025, I will be making more video game videos. And to me, Shadow of the Colossus is one of the most beautiful and unforgettable video games I've ever played, both in the original PlayStation 2 format and in the PS4 remake version. The remake really is just the exact same game but with better looking modern graphics, so I have no complaints about that. It is an amazing game. And I know that it got into the hands of a lot of people that had never played the original. So even without Ueda and Team Ico actually involved, Bluepoint did a great job at keeping everything that made that game special. And it's a really, really beautiful game that makes me think about the ideas of man and nature together a lot, which is always very impressive when a video game of all things can do that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Shadow of the Colossus as well as Team Ico's games overall, and what other games you'd like to see me cover in the coming year. There are a lot that I want to get to. As always, a huge thank you to my patrons for their continued support, and if you'd like to be a patron, it's only $1 a month for early access to every video, and exclusive Patreon-only reviews. So until next time, I hope that you're taking care of yourselves, and having a wonderful Draper.